Truth Plus Media.
Welcome to Iconic Sonics. I'm Mike Gastineau. We have a sensational episode for you today, recorded recently live at Seattle's iconic Edgewater Hotel with Samantha Holloway, the new co-chair and co-owner of the Seattle Kraken, and a woman who will play an integral role in getting the Seattle Supersonics back to the Emerald City. Our show is brought to you by Rise Above, by Epic Seats, and by Dick's Drive-In Restaurants. From the Edgewater Hotel, Samantha Holloway on Iconic Sonics. Welcome to Seattle's legendary Edgewater Hotel. We're in the Alki Room overlooking Elliott Bay. It's a gorgeous afternoon. We've got a room full of Sonics fans and Iconic Sonics supporters, and we've got a great show planned for you. I'm Mike Gastineau. My co-host today is Chris Daniels. Chris, good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm just a guy wearing Sean Kemp socks up here on stage, by the way.
I've got a pair of those. I'm glad I didn't wear them. That would have been so embarrassing for us to have the same socks. Our special guest today is one of the owners of the Seattle Kraken, one of the leaders of the Seattle sports community, Samantha Holloway. Sam, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, you're probably wondering, and Chris and I, over the course of our careers, have been fortunate enough. I think we've talked to probably just about every power broker in the sports business in town, most of them when they were asking us to leave their office. But we had not talked to somebody like this from the Kraken yet. You're probably wondering, how does something like this come together? It's a lot of moving parts. And it is kind of an interesting story. It was about a month ago, I was at a Kraken game, and I met Sam for the first time. I was in one of the suites, and she came up, and she introduced herself, and we were talking, and she put a hand on my shoulder. She was very kind, very nice, very warm person. She says, what's your name again? And I go, Mike. And she goes, Mike, is there any way to get you to stop eating all the coconut shrimp? And I said, well, yeah. I go, I do a podcast, and if you'd be willing to come on the podcast, I'll lay off the coconut shrimp for a while. So deal, right? Did that work out?
It's a win-win.
Win-win for everybody. That's right. I feel like we should welcome you to Seattle, but it's been a year now for you. It's been a couple of years, and then even more if we want to go back to when the Kraken kind of first arrived. For a minute, let's not think about what's going on the ice lately, because as the long season goes, there are times when there are struggles. In the big picture, I'm assuming you're pretty happy with where the Kraken are in the community, with the fans, with the continued building and knowledge of the game. Give us kind of your assessment of the state of the Kraken right now as a sports and a community-oriented team.
Yeah, so from an ownership perspective, we're extremely proud of where we are, both from an organizational perspective, from a community perspective, on the ice as well. It's our second season. We are very much contenders for the playoffs. The team is playing together, very much a we game. The guys are feeling a lot of synergy. It's very different than last year. Launching in the middle of a pandemic is quite difficult in a COVID-conscious town. That hasn't had an NHL team in almost 100 years. So it was definitely an uphill battle, but the organization was built with integrity from the ground up. We have tremendous executives. The team is outstanding on both hockey operations and the business side. And, we've been really surprised and excited, and we love the fan base. So, the reception from everyone in the community, from the sports community, from people who didn't know anything about hockey to the diehard hockey fans, they're all coming out. They're loving not only the brand, but they recognize what we're doing for the community, and they do like winning games too.
And let's take it back for a second. For people who are part of the Iconic Sonics family and are listening in the room or listening on the podcast, you were a University of Michigan grad, right? And then
I was.
And then started a business in Colorado before you got to this point, and then came right first as the executive director of the Kraken before you became the co-owner. Walk us through that for people who are listening for the first time.
Sure. So I've been involved since the beginning as a minority investor. Have watched this, tremendous organization from the very beginning, but still from the outside, as I did live in Denver for almost 20 years. I went to grad school there. I've had a few businesses there. And then about a year ago, more recently, I got more deeply involved as my father's the majority owner, and I sit on the executive committee, so that's what you're referencing. I became chair of the executive committee, which is the board, and as I was getting increasingly more involved, and obviously love the sport of hockey. I'm a big sports fan in general, as you'll get to know a little more. it became time to think about living here. And my family has a lot of history here, even though I'm new to the city. And my husband and I decided to move our family here this summer. And so far, it's been great. And over the last 8 months, I still do have one of my businesses in Denver, and I still work remotely on that. But I'm also at the Kraken Community Iceplex every day. I'm very involved in the day-to-day operations. Obviously, we have tremendous leaders in Todd Lewicki and Victor DeBonis and everyone else. But it's been great to have ownership closer. There's a lot of great local owners as well, but from a majority perspective, it's been excellent to be kind of in the weeds, and we're scaling, so it's a great time to get in.
Talk a little bit. I mean, there's some obvious answers to this, but your father, David Bonderman, is a tremendously successful business person over the course of his life and has been involved in sports for a while and is directly involved, obviously, in the Kraken being here. And I've seen you talk in the past, and if you could kind of relay in your own words why this is, I think we all would get it. But you wanted to kind of establish yourself coming out of school and doing companies, and you had great success as a business person yourself. Why was that important to you to do rather than just immediately maybe either working with your father or working in one area of the family business? Talk about establishing your own identity and what that meant to you.
Sure. Yes, my father's tremendously successful. He's extremely talented. He's very smart. He's a great deal guy. He's very generous. He's a conservationist. He's great all around, and I admire him greatly. And but I'm not him, so it was important for me to do something with my life that was meaningful, and that was, I think, a different part of my life. So I'm a tech entrepreneur. In a previous life, I actually got my master's in forensic psychology and worked at Juvie and did a bunch of community work before I got into business and got my MBA. I sold my most recent company in 2020, and I still work with my co-founders in Denver. We have a kind of a small investment fund, and then we are working on early stage products as well. But again, my focus is here in Seattle, most of the time. And as everyone who works in sports who's in this building knows, it's actually all of the time.
Right.
Yeah, how do you read this market right now as you're settling in and living here full time in terms of the Kraken and the success at Climate Pledge? It's obviously filled up, hundreds of nights already a year that are scheduled out. The Sounders are just starting up again with a new season with sellout crowds again. How do you read this market from a sports business perspective right now?
Yeah, so I have a tech background, so I wasn't involved in sports in Denver, so I don't have another market to compare it to. However, from my experience here, it seems that everyone is very well integrated. It's each team supports each other. The fans here are tremendous. I mean, you go to a Seahawks game and people are very positive from what I experienced. You go to a Storm game and everyone's extremely positive. I haven't seen the fan you don't want to see. I've seen great support from the community and from all of the leaders here. So for me, it's a very unique city. I think that those of you who have been here a long time would notice too that everyone's been here forever. It's kind of weird. And, but that's a testament to the city, right? And we can feel it just from being here for 8 months that, it really feels like home, and we understand why no one leaves, and we understand why people support the teams here.
And they keep coming back, right? Like Lenny Wilkens and George Karl and all the other Hall of Famers.
Yeah, you can't get rid of the good people.
Well, you're going to be stuck here if you made it through this winter. First winter's the toughest. Once you get through that,
I don't know what everyone's crying about.
Yeah,
it's not a big
it's
deal.
not Denver, right? It's not the snow and all that. Hey, is it true? I saw something. You're a University of Michigan alum. That one of the reasons you wanted to go there to give you some basketball bona fides in front of this crowd was the Fab Five kind of captured your attention.
It was the only reason, actually.
Where do you want to go to school? Michigan? Why? The Fab Five. Okay.
That was exactly what my dad said. Why do you want to go there? And I said, for the Fab Five. So I remember being by myself, cheering on the couch and then crying and all of the emotions.
Mm-hmm. You weren't crying that night, were you? No. I think this is unique in American sports right now, and I think it's a really cool thing. In the city of Seattle, there are other places where there are other female sports executives, but in this city, if you have a question, let's say you have a question about an ownership issue, you might call the owner of the Seahawks. She's named Jody Allen. If you had a business question, maybe you'd call the president of business for the Mariners. She's named Katie Griggs. If you had a facilities question or a competition question, you might call the athletic director at the University of Washington. She's named Jen Cohen. If they had a question, they might call you. This is unique right now. I don't think there's another city with 4, power positions filled by women. It's something. And I don't feel like I'm in a position to say, isn't this great? Tell me what that means in your mind. How important is it, and what does that mean to be a part of that?
I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why Seattle's so special and why the community here is so supportive of sports and diversity and change and being leaders in the world on an area that is not historically as diverse. And it's really exciting. And for me, it's been easier as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't feel at all like stepping into the boys club here, right? So it's a very welcoming environment, and I think the city's done a tremendous job lifting up women.
Yeah, and I heard Katie Griggs mention one time that when she first moved to town, she walked around what is now T-Mobile Park and noticed things as she tried to figure out how she was going to shape the franchise going forward. You've got the tech background. You're walking around at how that Amazon technology is working and how things are working within the arena. Are you doing the same thing on a nightly basis during Kraken and concerts?
Yeah, I mean, you're always walking around noticing what's working, what's not working, asking people, listening to the people in the seats next to you, talking about what's working and not working.
The $18 beers.
It's not that different anywhere else.
It's funny, there wasn't that in the suite. I digress.
How many did you have?
You were there. Hey, I would assume, I don't know, I shouldn't assume this, but I would think in your position you want to be a role model to young women, to young boys, to everybody. Do you do that by just the day-to-day and by leading and by doing the right thing and being a good example? Or do you think and do you separate out and say, okay, I am going to do something specific that I think will connect with younger people and show them this path that now exists that maybe 15 years ago didn't exist or wasn't, I don't want to say quite as easy, but quite as obvious to women who might be interested in sports?
Interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Again, I've been here 8 months. I think so far what I'm doing is trying to, lead by example, and still there's lots to learn. And again, tech background, at the end of the day, organization is all about the people. Mm-hmm. But there's still a lot to learn in the sports community. So I'm not afraid to learn more and show that that's a piece of being a leader as well. So I think leading by example, I think there's a lot of opportunity to be more intentional and connect with members of the community to be able to, go to schools or what have you in order to connect directly with youth. But I'm still getting going.
And you have to make time for that, obviously, because again, you're busy. You're running a hockey team in a building and all that. As you do that, and as you start to reach out, you keep talking about your tech background. Is there something coming that none of us know yet? I mean, clearly there is. But are you privy to something like, wow, here's what's the next big thing in an arena is going to be, or here's what the next big thing in ticketing is going to be? I mean, are these things that are being worked on all the time?
I mean, I see decks all the time, so there's stuff happening for sure. There's a company happening right now in someone's basement that we'll hear about at some point. Right. But no, I don't have some big announcement for you or some breakthrough that's going to happen.
What's your idea? What do you want to see? What's something we could see in an arena that make things better?
Climate Pledge is doing a really great job. Yeah. I think we're still optimizing certain things, and I think a lot of the technology that's out there is always being iterated on. And how can the team app and the Climate Pledge app even get better, right? And Todd's getting feedback all the time. For us, it's what I call being customer obsessed, and I ran the customer side of the organization in my last company, and so it's really important to get feedback from all the users, right? Good and bad, and understand demographics and what they're asking for and what matters. And so I think there's always improvements to be made, and then we'll never be there.
Right.
You just mentioned Todd, and the Kraken Community Iceplex is a big component for the Kraken as well up in Northgate. It's been a great facility with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people coming in on a yearly basis. That is a big part of what you do as well. And I understand you sit next to Todd in the office.
I do.
We've seen him in a public setting, and he's done numerous interviews over time. But what's one thing you think people in this crowd don't know about Todd, since you're next to him on a daily basis?
Todd likes the lights off, and I like the lights on, and it's becoming a bit of an issue. So, no, he drinks a vanilla latte in the morning.
It's a vanilla. How many times in the time you've known him has he had a bad day or even a bad 5 minutes? The guy's relentlessly optimistic.
He is a remarkable person, and truly I believe that the Kraken organization wouldn't be what it is today or even possibly here without him. He is, I'm sure everyone in this room knows him, and he is extremely genuine in all his relationships. And so we have had great success because he has so much integrity, and he is so genuine, and he is so positive. It's almost infuriating some days, but it's tremendous.
I'll speak for me. I think there were other people that thought this too. A lot of great people helped make the Kraken happen. When Todd got involved, it felt real in this city. It's like, okay, now it is going to happen. I mean, because he had a tremendous run with the Seahawks. You know, the Seahawks, when they moved into their new stadium, it was clunky at first and some things weren't going right, and he connected the team with the community. Talk a little bit about his ability to do that and the influence that has on you, because we've talked about community involvement. You want to get out to schools and talk with kids and all that. Todd that seems to come like breathing to him. It's like so natural.
Yeah, and he's had a long and storied career and done lots of different things that are very impressive. But I think to have the opportunity to build something from the ground up is very different. And that he was able to take all his different experiences across, different leagues and different cities and different fan bases and different ownership groups and pick the things that worked. And, not everything, of course, is perfect, but he did a pretty darn good job. He has a great group of people that are executives at the Kraken, many of whom are in this room today. And it's like a hand-picked dream team. And so I do think that his experiences and his positivity and his connections to this city, and of course he happens to, he's lived in many different places, but spent a lot of time here. It's instrumental to where we are today.
We talked about climate pledge. We talked about community, the things that the Kraken are trying to do with community. Where do you think the Iceplex is headed? When you look at that building as you came in and you're working your way around the office, I mean, what's next for that building? Because it is active as well.
I mean, the training center, so the Kraken Community Iceplex is, home to the offices. It's where the team practices, but there's so much more there, from learn to skate and youth hockey and figure skating and lots of community activities. The One Roof Foundation is doing a ton there as well, and refugees are coming in, and then there's birthday parties. I mean, it's like, to get something on the schedule there is I'm trying to get my daughter's birthday, and I'm like, it's booked, so. It's a really great institution for Northgate. I think it's a great community building, but it's bringing hockey to everyone here. But there's people want more. So I think for us, it will be just thinking about how we can continue to give access when there's more demand than space.
Iconic Sonics is brought to you by Simply Seattle. Order your Sonics gear at simplyseattle.com with the code ICONIC15, and by the legendary Edgewater Hotel, our home for today's show, Seattle's only overwater hotel. Mark Cuban was on Iconic Sonics a while back, just briefly talking about the Sonics. And Mark was one of two owners that voted against the team leaving. So he's been, in my mind, a guy who has supported Seattle from the start. But he said, look, it's no guarantee you get a team back. And he was speaking as an owner. He's trying to drive the expansion fee up. I understand what he was doing. But he said, we've got to get the expansion fee to a certain level, or it doesn't make sense to us as owners to add 2 new teams. Today, a portion of the Milwaukee Bucks was sold to the Haslam family that owned the Cleveland Browns for $3.5 billion. The Suns, we saw recently exchange hands. It was over 4, wasn't it? Was it 4? It feels like the fee is getting to a level that might be acceptable. Just your opinion. Is there a number? Is it 4 to 5? Is there something in your mind that might get the NBA owners' attention and say, yeah, let's do expansion? I'm not saying tomorrow, but you know what I mean, to get the number to the right number.
I'm sure there is a number, but I'm not going to discuss it.
Do you have an opinion on it?
I'm just messing with you. Listen, I do. I think it's early to discuss a number. I think that there's a really broad range based on a lot of nuance. And I think even those 2 deals have a lot of nuance, and there's a headline and there's what happened. And so it's a very long conversation, and there's a lot of work going into figuring out what that looks like. And of course, we respect the owners. We respect Adam so much that this is, if we get the honor of bringing back, hopefully we get the honor of bringing back the Sonics, it will just need to be done in the appropriate way. And I believe part of that is the price discussion.
And there's a lot of people in this room who believe we're just waiting to hear on the collective bargaining agreement and on the media rights deal. Are you under the impression that's the same thing?
Pretty much.
And speaking of
Nice
that,
short answer.
speaking of that, we saw stories on the collective bargaining agreement that the phrase that was used is we're down to a matter of weeks. Either side could have opted out. They both decided to opt in until March 31st. They both expressed today through sources and says, hey, we feel optimistic that we're getting close to getting a deal. So if it's that and then the TV deal, I mean, those are obviously, again, the TV deal is going to double or triple what they get and is going to include streaming. I don't know if you watched any MLS games this weekend, but they debuted on Apple. And they're going to be an all streaming thing, and they made $2.5 billion. The NBA is looking at maybe $75 billion for a TV deal. It's amazing, isn't it? Chris asked, they're kind of tied together. Could a person be optimistic that all that might happen a little faster than we think of in business? Normally we think business takes forever. Could that happen faster, maybe?
This is just my opinion, so I have no insider information here. Mm-hmm. But yes, I think it could happen faster than anyone thinks.
I was just going to say on the economics, when we start talking about numbers like Gas just threw out and potentially an expansion fee of $2, $3, $4 billion, name your number. Is that scary at all? Like how is anybody supposed to afford that? And then how are fans supposed to afford that down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a real issue that's worth discussing, and I do think that for us, bringing the right ownership group together that has different perspectives and diversity and a different kind of doing it different, kind of the way that we did the Kraken is very important to us. I mean, there's so it's a big complicated deal to execute, and that's also what makes it fun. But yeah, there's it's going to be complicated, and it is a big number, and we are prepared to get the deal done, but we will execute it in a specific way.
One of the important things when you're bringing a new team into a building is making sure terms, the second team into the building back in the day almost always had a worse deal than the first team. I don't think that'll be the case with this building because of the synergy between the building and the Kraken, and between potentially the building, the Kraken, and the Sonics. In other words, you're all going to be involved in it. Am I on the right path? In other words, if an expansion team's available, if an ownership group's available, it wouldn't be a stumbling block to say, oh, we're going to give you a pretty lousy lease and not allow you to make money, right? I mean, the synergy is there to make that work for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, Climate Pledge Arena is a world-class arena that was not just built for hockey, but it was built with basketball in mind. Obviously, the Storm play there. Mm-hmm. We've had some great preseason games, the Globetrotters, I mean, NCAA. It's a basketball arena as well. And luckily, if, we can make that happen, yes, we won't give ourselves a bad deal.
Right.
And
See, that's how you end up being in the big office with Lewicki. You know what you're doing. Don't give yourself a bad deal. Brian alluded to it earlier, and I mean, you see it in this room. We did an event with George and Gary and Sean and Kevin Calabro last May at Dick's in Queen Anne in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant. We had 400 people under a tent. We've got 100 people in the room tonight. We've done another event here with this same kind of crowd. Long-winded way of saying this is unprecedented in American sports, that 15 years after a franchise is left, with nothing more than these crumbs of, oh, they're coming back, that there's still that much energy. Tim Lewicki's right, isn't he? Comment on the idea of what a success story this team, the Sonics, could be in this city.
Yeah, I mean, those of you who, I'm guessing a lot of you, were at the preseason game at Climate Pledge Arena in the fall. It exploded, right? So when the Sonics come back, it is going to be out of control. Awesome. Mm-hmm. And yes. Mm-hmm. And it is true. So the fans are unlike anywhere else, right? The excitement is there. The positivity is there. There's a huge history. There's, like lots of feelings, like a lot went down here, right? And I, again, am coming into this city. I'm not presuming anything. I am new here. My family has a long history here, but I'm new here. So it's fresh eyes, and it's a tremendous honor to even have this potential opportunity. So I very much appreciate everyone's support that's here today. But I think that we're going into it with a huge advantage because of the fan base here and the strong desire to have the team back, and the willingness to, pay homage to the past and to respect what happened. But really, and Brian said it, to look towards the future and what does the city mean now, and what does the city need now from a team, and how can we do that together?
Sam, this has been great. I mean, it's cool to get kind of a view into what's going on in the executive offices and some thoughts on what might happen. I know, Chris, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you doing this.
Well, I loved it, though. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How about Sam Holloway from the Seattle Kraken on the return soon of the Seattle Sonics. Thank you for listening to this episode of Iconic Sonics with Samantha Holloway. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making our shows possible. And you can get more information on our sponsors and on other episodes of Iconic Sonics by going to iconicsonics.com. I'm Mike Gastineau. See you next time.